previous year and $25 more than pre-pandemic times in 2019. Overall, food prices are anticipated to increase by yet another 3.5% this year. Before diving into the causes and implications of food price volatility, it's important to understand them in the context of New York City's food system and the critical role of strong infrastructure. About 19 billion pounds of food flow through New York City each year. This flow is the product of a complex mix of regional, national, and global supply chains that grow, process, and distribute food, and a rich local food economy that prepares food for purchase and disposes of food waste. The workings of these supply chains affect the daily life of every single New Yorker. Yet, unlike New York City's other essential systems, from our roads and our water and electrical networks, for example, our food system is not centralized in design or management. Our food system is what we call a distributed system, made up of tens of thousands of large and small businesses and essential nonprofit organizations in the local, regional, national, and global, and millions of consumers interacting largely independently to match food supply and demand. So our food system is unique in two major ways. First, our city's ethnic diversity necessitates multiple complex supply chains that source products from across the region and the globe to cater to our distinct tastes and needs of New Yorkers. Second, and relatedly, the majority of food businesses, as you've pointed out, Councilmember, from grocery stores to restaurants and distributors, are small scale and independently owned rather than national operations. This varied and nimble business landscape is well suited to serve our unique needs and supports both economic opportunity and food system resilience, but it also poses risks, including coordination challenges and the general vulnerability associated with small-scale independent businesses. With that in mind, our food infrastructure is similarly varied and complex. Our infrastructure spans multiple phases of the food system, includes both physical spaces, such as warehouses, storage, and storefronts, as well as networks of transportation and market systems, from our rich farmers market to online retail access, and clearly our emergency food providers of food pantries and kitchens. Across these settings, the city has made significant investments to improve all types of infrastructure. So you've just visited Hunts Point, and so I just want to point for everyone's attention that the Hunts Point Distribution Center is the largest food distribution hub in the country, distributing over 2.5 million pounds of produce alone every year. However, having opened in 1967, the existing produce market facility is way beyond its useful life. It no longer adequately serves the space and operational needs of the cooperative. The existing refrigerated warehouse buildings do not have the capacity to meet market needs and must rely on idling trucks to serve as additional warehouse storage. Infrastructure deficiencies have also created problems, leading to the persistent intermodal traffic conflicts, delays, congestion, and idling. Taken all together, the existing conditions result in operational inefficiencies, increased costs, and increased diesel emissions. As part of Hunts Point Forward, a 2022 report that included over 70 recommendations for investment throughout the peninsula, EDC and SBS have been redeveloping and modernizing the produce market. To strengthen New York City's food infrastructure and increase storage capacity, New York City has dedicated $130 million in addition to state and federal monies that will amount to approximately $630 million in total. The project will replace the existing produce market facility with a modern, state-of-the-art intermodal facility. It includes the replacement of all existing buildings with 2 new refrigerated warehouse buildings, a new administrative building, a waste management building, and a maintenance facility totaling approximately 916,000 square feet. The new facility will expand the produce market's current capacity, increasing operational efficiency, eliminating the need for diesel-powered transport refrigeration units currently operating on site, and keep jobs in the Bronx. The project will meet the space and operational needs of the cooperative's produce market's current location while improving traffic patterns and site-wide circulation, addressing again those intermodal traffic conflicts and encourage rail usage. In addition to the produce market renovations, after nearly 10 years, Grow NYC's regional food hub, located in the Hunts Point neighborhood, is finally set to open in May. The new 60,000 square foot food distribution hub will quadruple Grow's aggregation and distribution square footage, allowing them to expand their food distribution capacity to 20 million pounds a year, which is a significant increase from the organization's current capacity of 5 million pounds per year. The hub will support mid-sized regional farms by connecting New York City's wholesale buyers with high-quality farm products, while ensuring all New Yorkers have access to these fresh, nutritious foods. The facility has 7 produce coolers and a freezer, a biodigester on site to reduce food waste, a gray water system, green and blue roof features, drought-tolerant plants, and a rainwater collection system, permeable pavement, and EV charging stations. This facility will distribute to its current 370 food partners throughout the city and continue to grow in that place. New York State produces enormous quantities of diverse food products, the majority of which are marketed nationally and internationally. With demand rising for local and regional food for urban, public, and private markets, there's new attention to the infrastructure gaps that limit the quantity of New York and neighboring state food supply to both public and private markets in the city. Recent and ongoing research for the investment of infrastructure to scale up the volumes of regional food supply for city markets, including public agencies that serve schools, our hospitals, and our senior and early feeding sites, have resulted in state and federal investments in regional infrastructure. And these projects are going forward. New York City is supportive of these investments in regional food infrastructure. Another key aspect of our food distribution is, of course, the transportation of food itself. Nearly 90% of goods in New York City are transported by truck, and roughly half of the city's food supply moves through just 4 major bridges and 2 tunnels, making the city's food distribution system vulnerable to traffic congestion and infrastructure strain. Instead of viewing our island geography as a limiting factor, we're working to capitalize on the waterways that surround us. In 2023, Department of Transportation and EDC announced the Blue Highways Initiative to shift more freight transport from congested roadways to the city's waterways. Marine transportation has the potential to reduce transportation costs, decrease roadway wear and tear, streamline delivery routes, and ensure more reliable distribution in the face of emergencies or road closures. Hunts Point's proximity to the water and its position as a critical city food distribution node provide an opportunity to utilize the Blue Highways network in connection with the Brooklyn Marine Terminal. The redevelopment of the Brooklyn Marine Terminal will invest in the site and operational upgrades to make it more efficient and competitive, allowing the marine terminal to attract more businesses. A Hunts Point Marine Terminal would enable the barging of perishable food into the Bronx and the nearby Hunts Point Food Distribution Center from Brooklyn Marine Terminal, again, decreasing truck traffic in the city, adding resiliency, and making New York City more competitive in the food distribution supply chain as food distribution companies consider where to locate their warehouses, their distribution centers, and ultimately where they create jobs. By investing in infrastructure to improve port operations at Hunts Point, Brooklyn Marine Terminal, and other sites along the East River, we're increasing resiliency to ensure New York City is better equipped to move food in and around the city, especially during times of emergency. Nearly half of the food distributed citywide is refrigerated or frozen, requiring specialized storage and transportation. Cold storage maintains the quality and freshness of items like produce. However, the finite supply of real estate in this city makes it difficult to expand or establish large-scale cold storage facilities, something we became increasingly aware of during COVID. And in response, the city is exploring avenues to expand its cold storage infrastructure. So certainly cold storage makes fresh produce more accessible, and multiple access points to healthy and affordable food is the primary goal of Food Forward, whether through traditional supermarkets, farmers markets, bodegas, street vendors, or through the city's emergency food network. 2,000 stores across the city participate in the health department's Shop Healthy NYC, which increases nutritious options in neighborhoods that otherwise have little access to healthy foods. The FRESH program, Food Retail Expansion Program to Support Health, supports the development of full-service grocery stores in low-income areas by providing both zoning and tax incentives to property owners and supermarket operators. The tax incentive program is administered by the New York City Industrial Development Agency, and the zoning benefit is administered by the Department of City Planning. To qualify for the IDA benefits, supermarkets must make capital investments into or existing space, dedicate 30% of retail space to perishable goods, and devote at least 500 square feet of retail space to fresh produce. Currently, there are 43 IDA and DCP fresh incentivized supermarkets open and 17 more in development. Through zoning, we can attract supermarkets as well as other food businesses. Recent zoning changes through City of Yes for Economic Opportunity allow food production and processing in storefront space for the first time. These new regulations could facilitate multi-use food spaces. City of Yes is building on increasing commercial vitality. According to a DCP report last November, more than 70% of neighborhoods across the city have seen an increase in food and drink businesses since 2020, providing more options where New Yorkers can eat. Our city's soft infrastructure provides additional food access points. The network of farmers markets that serve as access points for regionally sourced fruits and vegetables, and the network of more than 1,000 emergency food providers creates an essential safety net of support that connects some of our most vulnerable neighbors to quality, healthy food. Given the complexity of access and affordability, Mayor's Office of Food Policy launched a food access and affordability work group last June, which convened city agencies, our academic institutions, public health foundations, and community partners to coordinate information sharing. A report later this spring from this work group will outline immediate priorities. This effort is part of the Health Department's Chronic Disease Prevention Plan and will shed light into how food pricing, retail environments, and the choices and behaviors that New Yorkers have the ability to make and purchase healthy food. With this understanding of the city's food system and our infrastructure, I'm now very briefly going to address some of the causes of rising food prices, their impacts on city agencies, and how the city can help New Yorkers stretch their food budgets. The rise in food prices that we've seen is a complex issue that involves a mix of domestic and global factors. In the last 2 decades, there have been food system shocks affecting food prices and supply volatility, from terrorism, notably 9/11, hurricanes, in particular for us, Irene and Sandy, the COVID-19 pandemic, overall global conflict, and now trade tariffs. Drought, avian flu, and access to undocumented labor are contributing factors to these increases as well. Climate change and extreme weather events pose additional challenges to the affordability by impacting food production, storage, and distribution. Increasingly unpredictable and extreme weather conditions can both raise production costs for farmers for things like irrigation, their pesticides and fertilizers, yet reduce their crop yields. Extreme weather events can disrupt food distribution networks and further limit the supply of fresh and available produce, all of which lead to a higher food cost borne by New Yorkers. Food prices are influenced by the ripple effects from these shocks, including labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and inflationary costs impacting every single stage of food supply chains. It's often not just one factor, but a combination of factors that pushes food prices higher over time. Generally, city policy and programs cannot address the primary drivers for price volatility, which, besides the larger system shocks, are also influenced by the production and manufacturing decisions of supply chain actors, consumer demand, and by the speculation in financial markets. At the city level, we do not have the ability to mitigate the impact of these costs, with the exception of the authority held by the Department of Consumer and Worker Protections during states of emergency to enforce against price gouging. DCWP's ability to address price gouging complaints applies to a subset of products that are deemed essential, such as milk, eggs, bread, and most recently, baby formula. Nonetheless, policy and programs that improve efficiency, expand storage capacity like I've described, and provide alternative distribution channels can have a price mitigating effect. So to turn back just very briefly to the impacts of rising food prices, my office has been in very close touch with city agencies to assess the impact on meals served to their clients. While agencies are committed to maintaining their menu items, these rising food prices, especially for eggs, require staff to explore alternative solutions, including temporarily removing items from the menu if needed. Agencies' food contracts account for more than food prices. They also cover the logistics, the labor, and the meal delivery and food delivery costs, all of which have risen and put pressure on existing contracts. For example, following negotiations with its distributor, the school's Office of Food and Nutrition Services approved an updated food distribution contract that accounted for a higher delivery markup to account for rising costs. That said, the agencies are committed to serving meals that consistently meet nutritional requirements and are very closely monitoring this evolving situation to maintain the quality of meals being served. While the city cannot control prices, we do administer programs that help food budgets stretch farther. The health department's several nutrition security programs to lower barriers to fresh quality produce for New Yorkers with low incomes, such as Get the Good Stuff and Groceries to Go, provide discounts on fruits and vegetables at grocery stores and bodegas. And Health Bucks, as you all know, enables SNAP participants to access more fresh produce at all New York City farmers markets. When New Yorkers need additional support to feed their families, they also turn to the Emergency Food Network. In fiscal 22, the Department of Social Services transformed its 30-year-old emergency food assistance program to become Community Food Connection and introduced fresh produce for the very first time. In fiscal 24, nearly 700 food pantries and soup kitchens participated in the program, which saw more than 35 million visits and allocated more than $43 million in fresh fruits, vegetables, beans, and other staple foods. And of course, we rely on our safety net program of SNAP, which serves nearly 1.8 million New Yorkers. It is the largest safety net program to provide income assistance to eligible families. In conclusion, rising food prices continue to pose significant challenges for food and nutrition security in New York City, making it more difficult for many residents to access fresh and healthy, affordable food. The city remains committed to strengthening its food infrastructure and emergency food network, providing these essential nutrition security programs and serving healthy foods. That said, fluctuations in food prices are multifaceted and largely beyond our control, as they're influenced by geopolitical factors, supply chain disruptions, local challenges, and constraints. Nonetheless, we welcome this discussion, truly welcome this discussion, and look forward to identifying opportunities for continued collaboration with both of you, your teams, and further advocacy. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Gutierrez is also on Zoom along with Mr. Banks. And we are really pleased that Councilmember Riley is here in person. First of all, thank you very much for all of your advocacy, Kate McKenzie, because you've been doing this for a long time, and it's really, really appreciated. I want to just ask about the Food Forward, because that was a 10-year policy plan published in 2021, as you said. And, you know, the food prices were up then, but obviously much more now. So I didn't know if your office has adjusted its approach to any of the contents of the plan, considering our current environment. And you did list some ways in which the city can address quality and rises in food prices. But is there something else that we should be doing in terms of publishing and updating the plan?
Thank you so much for that question. So the 5 goals of the plan, the first one that we've spent a lot of time talking about here, which is ensuring access to affordable, culturally appropriate food, and the others are sort of everclear. Those goals. I can't see any reason to change those, but the strategies and the change in the context, it pushes us to do more and different things. So clearly, right after the pandemic, as you witnessed and experienced too, we needed to really shore up our emergency food system in a different way. So things like looking at the allocations that we provide to our food pantries and our soup kitchens, influencing the things like the racial inclusion and equity neighborhoods, giving an extraordinary amount of choice for all of those food pantries to order what they want and need. That was not the case before that. So recognizing, I'll point out one from your district, Westside Campaign Against Hunger, who has a number of food sources, they should be able to figure out what they need and order accordingly. So some of those changes to longstanding programs are things that we made in response to the plan. Things like groceries to go, which was ultimately from Get Food to a recovery food program to now ensuring that some of our neighbors who otherwise would not qualify for SNAP have benefit programs available to them. That's something like we've done with groceries to go. A significant amount of work is going into really rethinking the Fresh program. I took a note how you pointed out the connection between the larger size of stores and the quality. There's often a relationship there, and recognizing that with our real estate in this city, it's often hard to attract those types of businesses. I'm personally interested in finding ways that are not just about retailers, but also things like we've seen in Boston and up in Utica, other forms of retailers that might be trying nonprofit models of grocery stores and things like that. So those are the things that we're working with some of our city agencies to expand on. Again, I think really doubling down in these times more than ever, the support for our safety net programs of SNAP, and even things like childcare, and certainly now that we have our universal school meals nearly made permanent, those ensure that our children are fed at least 2 meals a day without question. So in addition to underscoring the safety net programs that we have, shoring them up, we're also looking at the businesses and clearly the infrastructure that I've outlined.
Okay, well, it's particularly important because I believe that the number of people receiving SNAP benefits in New York was 1.8 million, but a 5.8% increase in the first 4 months of 2025. That's a huge number. I believe there's as a result of the report, the New York City Regional Food Working Group that you convene, and I want to know more about what they do. I guess there are about 100 regional partners. You focus on things like my favorite topic, agriculture in the watershed, infrastructure issues, which you have mentioned, and other long-term topics. So I just didn't know, what can you share about any takeaways from those meetings? Do they meet? What do they talk about? What can we do to add to this discussion today from that discussion?
Sure. So just for context for others, the Regional Food Working Group started during the pandemic, early days when we were thinking about like interstate travel and you needed something to put in your windshield that you could move from one place to another, and having, I think it was long haul storage so that some of our trucks could stay at Hunts Point overnight. So just talking across state lines seemed so obvious, and something that we continued throughout certainly the pandemic, and I would say until about 2023. Now we've taken a lot of those conversations and some work that my team is working on with something called the City Food Policy Project, which is looking at certain crops that are grown in New York State and really finding ways that we might be able to maximize things like cabbage or things like
lettuce.
Things like lettuce and leafy greens, to find ways to get them into a washed and bagged facility that could come into New York State, into our public schools. But there's a lot of, certainly with DCP and looking at ways in which some of these like not one-off at this point, but what that did, and again, I'll refer to the soft infrastructure of simply maintaining relationships, has really proven successful in ways that we see a lot of fruits to their labor right now.
Okay. I mean, they all know the story, but many years ago when I was in the council, I talked about the lettuce washing machine. Do I have one yet? I was gonna bring the little one that EDC gave me 20 years ago, but I'm just wondering, are we any closer to getting a lettuce washing machine? Because they have one in California. So the Californians brings the lettuce, they wash it in California, they bring it to New York. Bumpity, bumpity, bump, all the way across the United States. So I'm wondering, can we get a lettuce washing machine? You could call it the Gail Brewer lettuce washing machine.
The naming opportunities are wonderful.
Yes.
And I would say that some of the produce.
I'm not kidding. I know it's a
No,
joke.
I hear you. And I think this, you're describing a lot of the parts of the supply chain, right? Of like, in order to get lettuce into our salad bars in schools, they get it in a way that is bagged and washed and chopped and all the things. And I believe that as we're looking at the modernized Hunts Point marketplace, things like that will certainly be considered.
You'll put one in the modernized, I didn't see it in the RF.
I would imagine it would be for consideration at that, but some of the looking outside of the 5 boroughs to be able to bring it in, that's the regional connections that we're making as well.
Councilmember Krishna joined us, thank you very much. One more question, then I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague. In that same report, it was, New York has voted to create a true cost of living measure to track the annual cost in our city of meeting essential needs, including food. How is your office working with agencies to implement that measure? Because if we have, it's like everything else, you have data, you can make the policy and change it if necessary. It's all about data.
Deputy Mayor Almanzar's portfolio is also my colleague Sadia Sherman, and Sadia is with the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity and Justice. And Sadia's team is coming out with some of the true cost accounting methodologies, and we have been chatting with her team for the better parts of 2 years to make sure that things specifically around food prices are captured within that.
So when is that arriving?
I believe it is this, I'm 99% sure it is this spring, but we'll get back to you and invite you to learn more about that.
Okay, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you, Chair. Food system experts say produce freshness depends on adequate refrigerated storage space, yet we know in New York City, in our region, we really don't have that many refrigerated storage spaces and warehousing considering the size of the population that we have to serve. Has MOFP done any research into why New York City and the region have such a shortfall of cold storage space for produce?
Do you want to take this? So, in my testimony, I noted the very, very high cost of real estate in this city. And I know that there have been some studies that are looking at like what is the capacity that's needed. And certainly as the produce market is modernized, I referred to, I believe, a whole brand new set of refrigeration specifically for produce. I just want to also point out what the council member Brewer said in her remarks about the really how grocery store workers are really working hard at this. And I want to lift that up too, because it's also about, the proper like storage temperatures and what goes where. And so much of that is something that the grocery stores are supporting as well, to make sure that we don't have just, lettuce on the floor, but it's also refrigerated in the right way. So I do know, if there's anything else that my colleague from EDC might like to share on that.
No, I think that was great. Thanks, Kate, and thank you for the question. I think from EDC's perspective, we are really focused right now on the Hunts Point produce market redevelopment, and so a big focus of that will be on the 2 new refrigerated warehouses, which we're really excited to be able to bring online, both for the additional refrigeration capacity, but also really so we can get rid of those 1,000 transit trailers that are sitting outside. So that's the first step that we're most focused on, but I'm excited to see those come online in the future.
Great, thank you. We like to just keep posted on that. A lot of those trucks end up idling and, It's been going on for several years, so it's important to be looking at that infrastructure. And then in terms of looking at enough support for building out our food system infrastructure here in the city, do we have any natural linkages with regional food farm hubs? And just kind of in your touching on in your testimony speaking about the regional food hub with Grow NYC that's set to open in May. Is that going to be a system we depend on to help alleviate or reduce some of the costs for the essential foods that we're looking at that maybe are going to fluctuate depending on all the factors that was mentioned in your testimony?
Yeah. So the Grow NYC's regional food hub is to supply great quality wholesale product to currently is a lot of nonprofit organizations that maybe have child care centers or other programs. So it is a source of food that is to buy in the same way that another source might be, but they're really connecting again on the great quality of that product, and again having, I think it's 300, close to 400 partners right now, but looking to grow even more. So we also, and I can share, sort of a spin off of what Councilmember Brewer was speaking about with the regional working group. We have a lot of, there's I think 4 other aggregation sites across the state, some of whom are even supplying the city with food. Headwaters Food Group is one of them, and there are others that might even be providing testimony here. So really trying to look to those programs, not just certainly to supply us, but also teach us a lot about how they're operating, how they meet their margins. We all know that food businesses are really hard to, it's almost unheard of to make a profit, but thinking about what is the successful model that we can learn from.
Great. We've also been joined by Councilmember Williams and Salamanca. Is there a need to support hyperlocal food production systems where access is greatest and affordability can be addressed? And what do you folks think that support looks like in terms of it being hyperlocal?
Yeah, so what in May, the report from the Affordability and Access Working Group that's been not just interagency, but with academic partners and community groups, will be coming out with some recommendations to address some of that. Because we all know, depending on where we live, the same market basket of food can cost something very different. So while we may not have the ability to intervene in the prices, we can really understand more about that and then figure out how we could maybe get things like more health bucks or more of those incentives programs in those areas with highest costs.
Thank you for that response. I'd like to just ask a couple of questions on the Hunts Point redevelopment. Sure. Is NYC considering, I know you folks are considering activating the Blue Highway and moving the food via barge and water to reduce truck dependency? Is that something that we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay, and then have we examined the ability of the existing ports and related infrastructure to contribute to that effort?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in general, we're looking very holistically at the Blue Highways network. We are trying to utilize our great position on the water to really be able to take trucks off the road and to try to move as much by barge as possible. I'd say that we are looking at a number of different sites. Hunts Point, obviously, because of its location on the water, is could be a great opportunity. And we've also explored. You're familiar with some of the other sites, but also on the Brooklyn Marine Terminal as well.
Sure. And then, when we were there visiting, we were able to see the accessibility, or maybe even the prospect of the accessibility towards the train lines that are there. To what extent will the planned redevelopment reactivate existing train lines? We know we have several that are active, but majority of them are inactive in this current moment.
Sure, and so I think in tandem, I think the reality is that most of the produce is still going to move via truck, but we do think Blue Highways and rail are a great way to kind of move some of that produce into a different mode, such as rail. We anticipate utilizing rail to a greater extent at the Hunts Point Produce Market, and to that end, one of the requirements for our design build, the RFQ that's out now, is to add another platform. We're really hopeful that that will both reduce some kind of congestion between trucks and rail, which should make some of our suppliers able to use it more readily. So we are definitely looking at ways to improve and increase rail freight at Hunts Point as part of the redevelopment process.
And is that currently included in the price point that we have in terms of the estimate?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. I'm gonna pause for now with my questions and kick it back over to Chair Brewer. And the last thing I say is we've also been joined by Councilmember Aviles.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the questions from my colleagues in a minute. I just want to talk about the supermarkets for a minute because two questions. One, do you talk with grocers about impediments to investment in new supermarkets or renovation of existing locations? I know you talked about the Fresh program. I'm concerned in Manhattan because I have a bill that says from Murray to 96th Street, which is that commercial rent tax, which I hate, at least exempt the grocery stores, and particularly the small ones, maybe skip Amazon and Whole Foods and so on. But I can't get any traction because everybody says, oh, we lose money. Well, the supermarkets are barely surviving. So my question is, what do we do to help our supermarkets generally? And that's the one way I would like to help them. And then do you keep track of the number and size of supermarkets in our city?
DCP maintains a list of the sizes in particular because the current iteration of Fresh has such size recommendations and requirements. But Councilmember, one of the recommendations that we'll be advancing this summer is a more intentional and engaged dialogue with supermarket providers to understand, to your point, are the current zoning and tax incentives that we have useful? If not, what would be? And also, particularly, I feel it's important to mention that with the potential cuts around our federal SNAP program, we really want to be in deep partnership with our supermarket advocates.
And when I say supermarket, I'm talking about delis, bodegas,
Yes.
et cetera. I assume you're talking about the same thing.
All the things, yes.
I have to say that must be a high priority. I can't tell you how hard it is. As you know, I'm in them all day long, how hard it is for the smaller ones.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing was just back to this cold chain business again, because it comes up a lot in the discussions. I understand that you have a concern because of the cost of land. I got all that. But what are we doing to try to address some of those in the 5 boroughs? I can't believe there aren't some other locations that could be used as cold chain business. Is there anything more that you could say about that?
So outside of the role of EDC and the development of that, we are investing capacity building for our emergency food network, and certainly to ensure that there's proper refrigeration in those, because we have such a strong focus on produce going through that network. So whether it's in the emergency food system, certainly again thinking about those grocery stores and the like, we are certainly invested in making sure that we have enough capacity for cold storage there.
Okay, because it's not only, in my opinion, which is so important, the emergency opportunities that you have made. I have to say congratulations to you, a huge focus. But also, there are all those micro-fulfillment centers, I don't know, they have names, as we know, I don't need to name them all, which are in the residential areas,
Yeah.
and they're shipping directly to consumers. So do you know whether those new cold chain systems are feasible in New York City?
I do not know, and I also, as we were putting together Food Forward back in 2020, the emergence of a lot of those, and I remember
They didn't exist before.
your focus specifically on drawing attention to the emergence of that was something that we were following closely.
Okay. And then just finally, the trucks that come into our city are huge. Obviously, we're trying to do other methods, rail, water, et cetera, not just at the hub, but in our city. So how does that, I mean, again, it's not your business specifically, I suppose it's DOT, I don't know who else. These trucks are huge, they're not weighed, they're killing the streets, they're bad for the traffic. Just generally, do the supermarkets request them? Do they need them? Is there some other way to work with those supermarkets?
I don't have the answer to that, but I would be happy to include that in our summer conversations with the grocers.
Okay. First, Councilmember Salamanca, and then Councilmember Riley. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you both, Madam Chairs and Majority Leader, and welcome. So I represent Hunts Point. I represent the world's largest produce markets. Well, produce, meat, fish, and the over 700 businesses that are in Hunts Point. If we can just start with, can you give us a percentage of the food that comes from Hunts Point? It feeds what percentage of New Yorkers and the tri-state on that?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember. I do not. I could probably speak more broadly to the amount of, like I know for the produce market, I think it's like at least 50% of the produce that runs through the market feeds New Yorkers. I think it's 35% of New York City's meat runs through the meat market, and 45% of the fish runs through the meat market. So really significant.
I go around, and I got a number one time that the markets gave me. They said they feed about 75% of New Yorkers in the tri-state area. So we could say that the markets play a major role in our food source in the city of New York. My question is, I saw here that the governor just made an announcement regarding the potential cuts from the federal government for the elimination of the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, and which it will result in the loss of over $325 million. Are you aware of that?
We are. I would say that we have been in constant communication with our federal partners at the Federal Highway Administration, and have been told our grant is executed. They've already committed $1 million to the design, and we are not aware of any concerns with that funding, but we are fully on top of that and understand like the concern around federal funding.
All right. So they're saying here in this statement that there is a potential of $13 million that will be lost. And this project aims to increase community resilience and protect New Yorkers' food supply by protecting two critical facilities against flooding. So should we lose that funding, what is EDC prepared to do to fill in that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can say, Councilmember, that like you, we are fully committed to this project going forward. It's like a huge priority for us, as I know it is for you. We would explore all other public and private options to fill in any future gaps, but are not at this point anticipating one.
Okay, all right. My other question is, I know that the produce market is up for a facelift, and I know that my colleagues were there last week. My dad worked in the produce market for 18 years. He was a local 202 member. He took me to work with him when I was a young adolescent. So I understand the importance of the markets, not only in terms of job creation and employment and what it does for families. I'm here today because of that job that my dad had, but also the importance that it plays in terms of our food supply. But the concern that I do have, it has a negative effect, which is the environment and the air quality and how it affects our air qualities. And right now, these markets are running on diesel fuel, especially, the produce market is running on diesel fuel because the tractor trailers, they use them for refrigeration. And I know that we've been able to secure, I believe we're at $600 million, right, for a facelift. Can you give us an update as to what's the next steps? Where are we with the construction of a new market?
Yeah, really happy to do that. And really want to echo our concern. We share like your same concern around environmental concerns, particularly in the neighborhood around those refrigerated truck units. And so one of the main components of the complete redesign of the produce market is really to eliminate those. Like we want those gone, and we'll have two new, much larger refrigerated warehouses so that we can get rid of those. In terms of the process, we released a request for questions. I think it was like early March. We had an initial info session with over 80 attendees. Responses are due at the end of April, and this is for the design build, as you know, and we anticipate the RFP for the design build to go out this summer.
Would this be a design and build project?
Yes.
Okay. I look forward to this project, and you will have my full support on how we can do to move this forward. I know that the majority leader spoke a little bit on the Blue Highway project, which I am extremely happy about. Through the advocacy of my office, we were able to clear out the barge, right, and move the detainees out of there. So do you have an idea when we're going to actually get rid of that floating jail that's just sitting there empty?
Unfortunately, Councilmember, I am not as up to date on the barge issue, but I am happy to bring that back and get you an answer on that.
Okay. The only concern that I have is and I wanted to put this on the record. It's important. I know that there's a letter floating around from EDC trying to get support on the Blue Highways project on the property where the barge is currently located. But in conversations with my office, we had conversations on the parking lot of the fish market. And so I just want to make it clear that that barge was there for over 30 years. The community wants access to that waterfront space. It's not to say that we can't share that property, but it's important that you go back to the community before a letter starts circulating for a letter of support and actually get a vote from the community board. Let the community tell us what we actually want on that piece of property. But know that I am supporting this process. Just looking for transparency, ensuring that they are part of that process.
Thank you for that, Councilmember. I'm happy to bring that back.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairs.
Thank you, Chair Brewer and Chair Farias. Good morning, good afternoon. How are you doing today? Just a few questions regarding the FRESH program. In 2009, the FRESH program was launched and up to date, and please correct me if I'm wrong, 28 projects have obtained the FRESH tax incentives, and 22 have completed it. Can you briefly describe the mission and current priorities that EDC has pertaining to the FRESH program?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Riley. So as you described, the FRESH program is a way that we are able to help supermarkets come into communities, particularly like low-income communities, poverty-burdened communities, communities that lack access to food. And so to date, we're excited to say that it's actually 43 IDA and DCP is open, and we have 17 more in development. In terms of the program, my colleague Kate mentioned there are specific criteria, so it has to be like 500 square feet. It has to have 30% available for perishable foods, and we're able to provide a couple of different incentives. So it's like a building tax stabilization, a land tax abatement, reduction of mortgage recording taxes, and so generally, I can speak generally about how the IDA would evaluate. I think looking at those criteria, making sure it meets the criteria of the neighborhoods that those that really need those supermarkets the most. And also know we're really excited that over 200,000 New Yorkers live within a quarter of a mile of an IDA Fresh supermarket. So really happy with that program. Those supermarkets, as you know, exist in all 5 boroughs. Bronx is actually our number 2 borough in terms of number of supermarkets. But yeah, happy to try to answer any other questions, or if I don't know, to get back.
Does EDC incentivize existing grocery stores to lower prices through examples like the Fresh Market? The Fresh program?
I don't believe so, Councilmember. I really think it's for getting new supermarkets, or I think it's new supermarkets or supermarkets who are entering an existing or newly created space to begin operations.
Does EDC keep record of MWBE businesses that apply for the Fresh program tax incentive?
I think, I'm pretty sure we do, but I can check on that and get back to
Can
you.
you get that information to
Yeah,
me?
of course, of course.
When identifying a food desert, can you identify what metrics you guys utilize to identify food deserts in New York City?
Yeah, and I can get back to you in specifics. I know DCP has a map, and I don't know if my colleague's able to talk to this more, that kind of lays out the criteria and also the neighborhoods in the city that are eligible. But Kate, if you...
Well, just to say, yes, the health department is also very influential in this. And I will say that since, and you pointed out the FRESH program started in, I think it was 2008, 2009, how we buy food has changed a lot since then. And I'm particularly interested also in how we factor in things like online purchases of food to determine a proximity of grocery stores in neighborhoods. So that's something that we don't have the perfect science to yet, but we do know that more and more people are able to buy food online. And yes, there are pros and cons to all of that, but looking at that when it comes to neighborhood proximity to quality grocers.
Okay. And last question. If large grocery chains divest from neighborhoods, does EDC maintain awareness of the situation and attempt to conduct outreach with smaller vendors in the area?
I know that our FRESH program is always looking to provide more information about what's available. I'm not sure in particular about when larger supermarkets close, but happy to look into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Farias is next for questions. We've been joined by Councilmembers Bottcher, Vernikoff, and Councilmember Joseph, who had to go back to the other. Councilmember Aviles is going to ask questions.
Oops. Thank you, chairs. Thank you. Good to see you today. Apologies if this might be a repeat question. I wasn't here earlier, but in the discussion around cold storage, can you tell me what the need for cold storage facilities are, and kind of where is EDC in its planning to meeting that need and/or vision?
Sure, I might, thank you for the question, Councilmember. I might defer the study on the need for cold storage to my colleague, but I can say with respect to cold storage at EDC, right now our focus is really on the redevelopment of the Hunts Point produce market, and so as you're probably aware there are, we really have a serious lack of refrigeration, and so there are 1,000 of these transport refrigeration units that are really idling on diesel, unfortunately, and are not great for our community members, like a challenge in an already environmental justice community. And so our priority right now is to really focus on the redevelopment of the produce market, where we will be building 2 new larger warehouse refrigerated facilities that will be able to really take those trailers offline. So that's where our focus is right now, and I would defer if Kate has anything to add on just broader cold storage.
I would say certainly that's right. Also, it's sort of it's a question that has to be asked sort of in the what is the use case, right? And I think we learned during the pandemic where we needed to store so much food to get it into people's homes. That was a specific use case, and it's sort of like we would never have that need, to be able to do anyone that needs food to get that to them. But what I can tell you is that where, for instance, in the emergency food space, we hear a need for cold storage or refrigeration, we work to make grants possible for what we call capacity building within the emergency food space. If we hear, I spoke earlier about Grow NYC, which is opening up a regional food hub that will have 7 different refrigerated units available in that. So the use case is to be able to have a 20 million pound a year food distribution flow. So that's thinking about that use case. And I think, it is just it's clearly acknowledged that when we were, whether it was storing vaccines or storing meals, we acknowledged that we were challenged when it came to refrigerated space in the city. And as there's a lot in the testimony here about just the distributed network of our infrastructure in New York City, how we have assets like these big hubs of whether it be the Fresh Direct building that wasn't there years and years ago, it has the capacity for cold storage. And so just looking at, and my colleagues at NYC, Emergency Management, do have a catalog, it's probably more than a catalog, but an inventory of all of the different assets in the city that have cold storage capacity, so that if and when we needed to activate something, we would know who to call.
So could you, I guess I have several questions related to that. I'd love to understand, I continue to hear that there is a lack of cold storage facility in the city, and an enormous amount of produce, food product is getting transported still very far to only come back into the city on a daily basis on trucks. So still that we're hearing double routes of moving. So I guess, do we have a sense of how much storage we would just need for our basic daily consumption network, and how much we'd need to build out?
I think as it relates, again, to my colleagues speaking about the asset that is managed here around Hunts Point, they've scoped that out and are building to suit those needs. But I would be very interested to hear more about the stories that you're hearing about trucks coming in and coming out. I would very much like to learn from that.
So how large are the warehouses that are getting built to offline the 1,000 transport units?
Thank you, Councilmember. I do not know the answer to the question of how large they are. I know the size of the whole site will be 916,000 square feet, but we can follow up with you on the size of the warehouses.
Yeah, I mean, I represent Brooklyn Marine Terminal, and this question of obviously cold storage and lack of and emergency use, clearly, which is why we are so keen on protecting the marine terminal for its actual use, was the port that was being able to bring in when trucks didn't want to come into Brooklyn or COVID. So cold storage is critical, but having a workable port also is critical to the Blue Highway system, and not creating minimizing its footprint significantly is a huge problem for so many of us. But thank you, chairs. I have more questions, but I could go in next round.
Councilmember Bottcher?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. What's your opinion about the idea of city-owned grocery stores?
As I mentioned in my testimony, we have a great deal of different sizes in supermarkets, and I think that there are a lot of new and different forms of grocery stores. As I was mentioning to Councilmember Brewer, there's some stores in Utica, for example, called Bargain Grocery. We've been in conversation to understand how we can really utilize a low-cost grocery model. Sometimes in other parts of the state or country, it's operated in a nonprofit model. So I am more than happy to learn about any form of grocery store to be able to serve the needs of New Yorkers.
What about the notion of the city owning and operating grocery stores itself?
What I have learned is that the operating a grocery store is hard, and ensuring the quality of certainly the worker protections, ensuring the quality of food. The margins are slim at best, and it's a hard business. So I would want to make sure that any market can be successful, and I'd want to understand more from perhaps my colleagues in Chicago or Washington who have dabbled in those ideas.
Thank you.
I think it's a terrible idea. I'm just pouring that out. We can't even figure out how to run too many things right here. Councilmember Vilas, do you want to go ahead with your other question? Then I'll go ahead. Go ahead with your other question if you have it.
Ooh, it's good to know the chairs. Thank you, chairs. So in terms of, let's see, so you're going to get back to me on the warehouse sizes. And you mentioned the discussion around the use cases. And so I guess NYC is the holder of this map that will tell us what our capacity is during an emergency situation. The investment, my colleague was mentioning the $600 million for, I guess, the produce market itself. I guess my understanding is this investment has been happening over time. Could you tell me a little bit about the investment to improve the produce market? And it is New York City's one of our main assets.
Yeah, sure. So I can talk through probably, it's easiest for me to talk to probably the city, state, and federal funding. It's easiest for me to talk to probably the city, state, and federal funding. 130 million of New York City capital, 130 million of state capital, 110 million from USDOT, another 10 million from USDOT for EV freight charging, and another 25 million from USDOT for another grant. So that's 145 from USDOT. And then the rest, we are working on a robust public-private partnership to fill in the remaining financing.
Got it. Thank you for that. And in terms of the charging capacity, which I know is something you've been working on, can you explain a little bit to me about where you are in that process of electrification?
Yeah, sure. So my understanding and that's the EV freight charging hub that will be, I believe, at the AOU 2 site. My understanding is that we anticipate awarding off the RFP this summer.
And how much is the RFP?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can find that out for you.
Got it. All right, chairs.
So we're back to the market. So we do know that there'll be, the RFQ is due on April 28th, as I understand it. And then there'll be a request for proposals to be released to short-listed options during the summer. So what factors will EDC use to determine which RFQ submission will be shortlisted? This is a big question, a big deal for all of us.
Sure.
And also, I want to add, when we were there, I have an idea. They all may laugh at me, but it's something to consider. There are places in the country where you can, as a tourist, meaning a New Yorker or a visitor, visit the market. You can't do the current one. There are safety concerns. And obviously, safety concerns, intellectual property, and staff would have to make sure that it was safe for everybody. But is that part of your discussion? And my lettuce washing machine.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. I will bring back the request for the lettuce washing machine. I myself am a frequent visitor to other markets when I'm not in New York, so we'll bring back that request as well. In terms of, I am obviously not on the team that will be deciding on the recipient of the developer for the project. I can get back with specific criteria, but I'm assuming it's the usual, like financial viability of the project, like commitment to our hiring goals and standards, like making sure that they can really fulfill the project, because this is something that we'd like to go, we want and will go forward with. But in terms of the specific criteria, I can check back for you on those, and I'm not sure if those may also be available on our website with the request for the RFQ.
All right, thank you.
Council member, if I could just share, the last time I visited the market, 4 o'clock in the morning in September with NYC Tourism, to consider something just like that.
That's great. I'm glad we're all thinking along the same lines, but it would have to be into the RFQ or only in the RFP. In other words, you can't do this unless you have somebody including it in their proposal. So now I'm worried April 28th is soon. I don't know if you can add to an RFQ, or if you, can you get back to us as to how that would be possible?
I can get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
I can get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
In addition to the need for general redevelopment of the market as a whole, many of the cooperators will also need to install their own equipment specific to their products and operations. Has the EDC worked with cooperators to take those needs into consideration during the planning stages? Okay, and how does EDC plan to balance maintaining continuity of existing operations? This is something that's super important to me, as we've had many conversations about the large plans that come in front of us in the city and the continuation of those, including the transition of individualized team members, which in the Bronx, we've seen some transitions of who reps the Bronx and the planning of that, of the projects and assets, but also just in the continuity of the larger politics of New York City from one mayor to the next. How do you folks plan to take those things into consideration and implementing any of the substantial changes or processes of the redevelopment of Hunts Point?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I think in general, as you've noted, EDC, as other full city agencies, as a quasi-agency, have obviously worked through like a number of different administrations, a number of different changes. I'd say that this project is a priority for us. It will be continued throughout changes in administration, just as our other projects are, and we will ensure that it is stewarded through because it is so important to the city.
And is there like a strategic plan, strategic vision? Is there points during a calendar that we have? I know we're coming closer. Our goal is to wrap up all of the negotiations and agreements by end of year at Hunts Point to move the project along, but is there like a physical piece of paper that has a timeline that will then be transferred over? Or I'm just worried, I'm more so worried about the continuity of planning, and this isn't just Hunts Point continuity. We're looking at BMT, we're looking at Industry City, like all of these other areas that we have large plans, large contracted negotiations and strategic plans for that we need to make sure continue on. And someone is focused on maintaining the funding or keeping to the budgets that are allocated and the commitments to community.
Yeah, sure, and I definitely hear your concern, council member. I think we share the concern in making sure that the project goes forward. I can say for now that the set points in time at least are really like the RFQ process, the RFP process, and hoping to have that done, obviously by the end of the year. We'll see what happens with the administration, but making sure that we can do as much as possible, as quickly as possible, which is what we will continue to do.
Okay, and can I get an overview of the lands at the produce market? How much is city land versus state land, federal or private lands? Do we have that in front of us?
I do not, but I am happy to get back to you with that.
And I guess my follow-up is the nature of the relationships between the markets at EDC. Can you talk a little bit about that? If the cooperatives at the market want to make capital improvements, who's the approval process? Is it just EDC? Is it independently? Is it another agency?
Yeah, sure. And so that's a question that I probably will have to take back to get more clarity on, but I'm happy to do that. So the approval process for capital improvements.
I will follow up with
Yeah, of course.
The individualized questions. 100 million was allocated for infrastructure improvements at the Fulton Produce Market. That's something we spoke about actually when we were on the tour, and an additional 40 million was given to Hunts Point area by Mayor Adams for the Rebuild, Renew, Reinvent plan. Do you folks have what the funding will be used for at Hunts Point and how the funding is going to be utilized?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. So from the Hunts Point Forward Plan, the money was transferred to the New York City Department of Parks and the Department of Transportation in 2022. My understanding is that on the park side, $15 million has been put towards Bretto Park, and that's in the design phase. And that $25 million is with Department of Transportation, and they are looking at 6 intersections along Hunts Point Avenue and in design procurement.
Okay, and in 2012, the plan was short of the funding needed to upgrade Hunts Point. Does this funding aid in completing that long-term goal, or is there still a budget gap?
I am, in terms of I'm not certain on that answer.
Okay, we'll send that as follow-up. I will end there and pass it back over to Chair Brewer. Thank you.
I just want to know that in terms of the produce that comes into Hunts Point Produce Market, how much is local and how much is from out of town? And then following up from my other long-term question of how can we get more local products to be purchased by city agencies, which is, again, sort of like the lettuce washing machine, been going on for years. This is purchased by DOE, meaning the Department of Education, by correction, by DFTA, et cetera. Does that go through Hunts Point, or is it directly? All right, so that doesn't have any impact. But my question would be, how much is local, how much is from out of town, and does any of this discussion have anything to do with New York City purchasing locally?
All great questions.
Yeah, but they never get answered.
But here's what I can tell you, that we know that what we're buying from, let's say Chair Farias has a distributor, her company is based in New York, and I'm asking her to tell me of the potatoes, the carrots, the lettuce, where's everything coming from? We have now been at that for 4 years, and increasingly the data that I get from the, not you, but you, store is improving. So we're closer than we've ever been to knowing how much is coming from New York State fields as opposed to having an address in New York. I think it is a really important question that we want to get more clarity around as it comes to Hunts Point directly, especially in light of things like tariffs, and understanding what our vulnerability to really higher prices are there. But I can tell you also that since we've been in conversations, we now require through DCAS all of our apples and onions to come from New York State. That was always not the case, but that is the case now. And increasingly with some federal funding that is still here. We are buying more and more New York State specific products, everything from yellow and green squash to shredded white potatoes to corn on the cob to sweet corn, apple slices, and a lot more. So through those opportunities, and again, all of that regional infrastructure that we're building, we're getting more specific food products in. And as you know, because you know this so well, the opportunities for that largely are through schools, and then secondarily through the DCAS agencies of corrections and ACS, because they're buying the ingredients for meals, not necessarily the full package.
Right, okay. All right, and so in terms of the market, you don't have that data, local versus?
I do not. Council member, I know that I believe some of our market operators may be here later, and they may be a great source for that type of information.
Okay. I think I had a question.
Sorry, I just have one more last question. Can we talk a little bit about, if you can, on like the interconnectedness of our food networks, food waste, even just like our composting program that we're now rolling out, the sharing excess programs that we have, and the network of going either to schools or to pantries, et cetera, and how we're holistically looking at this from, yes, this space's aggregate amount of food, but also the larger network of making sure people have the food that they need on their tables.
Yeah, and I love that because it's also where we started in looking at the whole system of the food system, and that's from growing food to getting rid of the waste and the non-edible parts. Also appreciate the acknowledgement of Sharing Excess, which is a new partner at Hunts Point Produce Market. And some of my colleagues on my food policy team have been connecting colleagues at EDC with places like Barcelona and other cities, Milan, Milan. And so I would like to see that developed even more as an intentionality of the produce market. And also, as you pointed to, whether it's the organics collection, it's an interesting question of like, we want to see the organics clearly thrive and grow, but also we ultimately don't want to see it survive and thrive because we don't want there to be the organics waste in the first place. So this all, whether it's from teaching kids in schools to teaching neighbors about how to compost, that is all part of the cycle that we're clearly committed to. And I am looking forward to build like the further upstream solutions, like working with Hunts Point in an even more intentional way.
I appreciate that response. I also want to just state that, even in our shelter system and getting meal preps to certain, we have the hot food programs and the Meals on Wheels programs. Those could also be included in this network of getting fresh produce or getting the fresh produce to cook those meals. We have a lot of different providers with a lot of large contracts that are always trying to keep food or keep pricing in our communities. I mean, we consistently talk about Rethink NYC as an organization that we like to utilize and build partnerships with because they go to our local places. But they could also be looked at as partners and being able to help the local food network too in this way with fresh produce and fresh foods. So.
Yeah. And in the spirit of infrastructure, we consider that to be some of the soft infrastructure of making sure, whether it's Grow NYC's regional food hub, who's supplying older adult centers with ingredients to cook meals, or even Rethink, right? Like part of this is, again, helping break down some of the historic silos or historic partners so that we can be doing more with some of I think one of the best things to come from the pandemic is the emergence of food businesses and people interested in doing business with the city. And we are really trying to support and nurture that.
One last question, this is the last one, I believe, is that local community gardens, local school gardens, et cetera. And I wanted to know I know there's another office that deals with that in the city administration. But are there ways in which you think they, meaning the local farmers, not the ones upstate, which I also, as you know, appreciate tremendously, they can help us with some of these food problems? Is there some way that they can be involved? Obviously, they're not large farms, they're smaller, but there's something that they can do to help feed people.
Absolutely, and I think similar to the grocery store question, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach here, and I really want to appreciate the work of my colleague Kiana, and especially in the Data Explorer Hub that was recently launched. That can also help pinpoint some of the where food production is happening. As a mom of 2 public school kids, I love that my kids get a chance to see and learn about food through the growing programs at their schools. We're doing a lot again around education, but clearly it's about more than that, and seeing especially some of our community gardens that are, and urban farms that are growing. Maybe it's at production scale, but also just that connection to food is so essential. And so I love certainly the urban agricultural plan, the progress reports that they've had too, but really support again the both and approach to all of this.
Thank you both very much. We are now going to go to our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
I now open the hearing for public testimony. We're going to hear specifically from the leaders of Hunts Point, but we have to read this statement. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding, that decorum shall be observed at all times. Members of the public as such shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the table. Members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant at Arms for inclusion. If you want to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. You will have 2 minutes to speak on today's oversight hearing topic, which, as you know, is the city's food infrastructure and cost and quality of produce in New York City. If you have a statement or additional testimony you wish to submit, please provide a copy to the Sergeant at Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of the close of the hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. Now we're going to turn to an online panel. I must admit, we're not going to put them, make them speak just for 2 minutes. They can talk longer. We're going to hear from Arthur Goldstein, Nick Rodelli, and Matthew Doringo. Thank you very much. And they are on Zoom.
Hi, it's Arthur Goldstein here. I'm going to turn it over to Matthew Dorigo, a board member, and to Nick Rodelli, but appreciate that the council and EDC had a fabulous tour of the market last Friday, and we look forward to the conversation.
Shall I go next, Arthur? I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
I'm
Thank you.
Matthew Dorigo. I am an owner of one of the 26 merchant firms at the Hunts Point Market. Have been coming here to work for 51 years now, since I was in high school. Growing up in this market, it's more of a home to me than my home, almost, I would say. The changes in our industry and the changes in our city and the changes in our food supply have been slow and steady over the years, and over the last, if you look at it every 5 years, you notice it, but you don't notice it day to day. Our market is 58 years old now. It's been a wonderful asset for the city of New York, and has done a tremendous job of distributing produce. The New York metropolitan area is a unique area for produce distribution because of the density of population, the high price of real estate. I heard a lot of talk about cold storage and things of that nature. It's a real challenge to find space. None of our small greengrocer customers have a lot of back room refrigeration, so they rely on our Hunts Point Market as their warehouse. The rebuild that we've been trying to get done for 25 years now, we have a real shot at it again. At this point, the size of the market and the size of the cold storage that would occur from the rebuild, I would think would be about a 50% increase. The new market is mapped out currently at 42,000 pallet positions. Our current 4 buildings, row A, B, C, D, have about 20,000 pallet positions, and there's about 8 or 10,000 pallets that are on the TRUs, the storage trailers that we use. The market has not been big enough to hold its inventory since the early 70s. We are a little bit of an overflow market, so there's always a bit of oversupply there. But it's also what drives bargains for the consumers. Uh, Produce is very much a supply-demand dominant business. Contracts and things like that do not impact our market. We are more a day-to-day trading place. Our customers come every day. They look for bargains. They negotiate very hard with our salesmen, and every day things work out. And sometimes prices go up, sometimes they go down. But we are a market of last resort, and therefore we always have a little bit of an oversupply on, say, half of the commodities we sell, and a little bit of an undersupply on half the commodities we sell, just as an average over time. The relationship we have with our customers and with our city is symbiotic in nature. There would not be a Hunts Point market the size that we have if there weren't thousands of small green grocers that use us as their warehouse and survive because there's no super large supermarket chain around them competing. They rely on us for their supply. They shop 5 days a week. The market has maybe 2 or 3 days of supply in it before it runs out, and I would say our customers have about another day. So it's very, very fresh by necessity. You really can't do it any better, and I don't think you want to, because you want produce to stay fresh and you want it to turn over as quickly as possible. So the symbiosis has been around forever, and I don't anticipate it going anywhere unless the big banner chains figure out a way to battle the real estate business in New York and come in and invade our boroughs. There are a few exceptions, examples of success, but I don't anticipate anything happening to our customer base or happening to the necessity of the Hunts Point market. I can go on and on and on here. There was talk about rail and barge and over-the-road trucks being weighed, and I can answer any specific questions that anybody might want to, but had adequate capacity to inventory that the industry demands we take it on. And we don't turn down product because it really offers a downward price situation, which, gives better options and opportunities for the consumer. So to me, number one, lack of capacity for storage. We've made up for that in large measure by the TRUs. Nobody likes those, including us. It puts a whole nother level of handling and cost into our business. Instead of take it off, bring it in, and then load it back out, we take it off, put it on a cold storage van, take it back on, put it in the warehouse. And so you're moving things around unnecessarily. It would be wonderful to have a market where that does not happen, and the new rebuild would accomplish that. As far as other top line issues, the market's 58. It's a noble beast, but it's time for a dramatic redevelopment. I think our refrigeration is inefficient. I think there's ways to have much better efficiency and energy savings for the market, and lower our overhead. Uh, but it's a fairly simple place, the market. So, our top line needs are pretty much right in front, and I've just told you what those are.
Thank you. I appreciate your response.
The biggest question, of course, for the consumer is how we can lower prices, and obviously, I think that the quality stays pretty high, but prices are challenging. Obviously, the tariffs are making it even worse. So I was wondering if you felt the tariffs already, if you feel how it will impact, and, I guess what we can do about it, if anything.
So the tariff question is going to have a couple of, this is just an opinion. I'm not an economist, and the economists can't agree on it in the first place. So we are a spot market. The tariffs short term, I think for sure, are going to raise prices. And it will also drive down consumption a little bit. But we're heading out of import season right now. So most, if not all, of our produce, with the exception of Canada, because Canada has year-round supply of hydroponic tomatoes and things like that. Mexico will finish with grapes and melons in May, and then they'll be done until next October or so, or earlier than that. They have tomatoes earlier than that. But the vast majority of our product for the next 6 months is going to be domestically grown. So the impacts of tariffs will only be on inputs to growing, and I cannot think of any other inputs off the top of my head. So over the next 6 months, we're going to get a pass. Then when you get back into import season, if the tariff war is still going on, you'll see less imports coming because the importers will have had full warning. Right now, the importers are getting caught flat-footed. They've got deals that suddenly are going to have a tariff attached to them if it happens, and that's never good. So there'll be some money lost at the import level. But next year, the money will be lost at the grower level in the other countries where the product is being produced. And so there'll be a lot of scrambling and contracts and how the business is going to be done. What that means to the Hunts Point market is almost we're on the sideline, because we take positions day to day. So nothing's going to sneak up on us and get us for a long period of time. But it will create, I think, in general, a little higher priced market structure for produce next fall through winter and into spring as the import season unfolds. I think this summer, if there are higher prices, I think it's more from Mother Nature creating shortages and things of that nature.
Okay. Councilmember Aviles.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your testimony. I was curious about the capacity issue that you were talking about, and obviously using the TRUs to try to address it. So I represent the area that includes Brooklyn Marine Terminal, and we talk a lot about cold storage. Do you need this cold storage on site or with a southern location that could be used through barge service help to alleviate some of that challenge that you're facing with storage capacity?
Speaking personally from the Bronx perspective, the market redevelopment will go a long way to solving our capacity issues. New York is expensive. I always have thought that the oversupply that comes into our market might be better off being handled in New Jersey at a cold storage for 17 cents a square foot rather than 32 or whatever it is, although we don't pay it, but that's what the market would dictate normally. But if you had cold storage in other boroughs, like in Brooklyn, I would urge that the city tries to keep it privatized, because I do think that the one size fits all and the kind of rigid structure that would develop from a public project, I think it would be overbuilt, frankly. So the Brooklyn produce market, there's merchants there. I think that's a good place to start about whether they need a redevelopment, because that market might even be older than our market. There's, I think, almost no hope at the individual greengrocer level, except for maybe small business loans to get some infrastructure there. But if you've got the 25 merchants in the Hunts Point market, a adequate refrigeration system, which the new market would do, I think a whole lot would develop that would be very positive. I think it would add shelf life to the product, add freshness to the product, and and generally be very, very beneficial to the industry. I'm not really sure I answered your question very well
No,
there.
it's a helpful, no, thank you. Your response is helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I think that's it. We really appreciate that. We had a great tour, much thanks to your colleague, and to, we love the bananas. We love the bananas.
Let me could I just interrupt for 1 minute, council member? The Councilman Brewer salad washing machine.
Yes, well, how are we doing with that?
I will single-handedly spearhead the RFP to find the processing company to come into the market and work there. It would be, I will tell you this, it would be done by a firm and not by the market, because that's a highly specialized business and you need a processing company to do it. But we don't have one in there, and we could sure use one, so I think you're onto something.
You have made my day, you've made my family's day, you've made my history. I have this stupid little machine that they gave me from EDC from 20 years ago on my counter at home. I forgot to bring it in. You can't imagine, and thank you. I have no words with which to appreciate.
They're anything from little in the industry. They're very sizable, and
we're gonna get a big one privately done. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, and we will be working together. It's gonna be called after you, Nick. Thank you so much. Stephen Katzman. We've also been joined online by Councilmember Ressler. Matthew Durego, if you want to come on. Oh, you were just finished. We're looking for Stephen Katzman.
I'm here. I am here.
You can begin your testimony.
Go ahead, sir.
Not sure what I'm supposed to be saying.
Well, whatever you wanted to talk about, the market, the current and future, anything to do with food in our city, food production.
Production? Get Arthur. You're muted.
Thank you. Just to bring Steve up to speed, he was in a meeting. So Matthew Durego basically did the overview and answered specific questions. So if the council members have any further questions, Steve Katzman is one of the co-presidents of the produce market. You may, Steve, just want to mention the few years that you've been at the market as an overview.
I think we're okay, Arthur, but thank you very much. And thank him also for his participation. All right. Thank you. So coming to the podium, please, Adiz Oakley from Rethink Food, one of our favorite organizations. Ray Gomez from the Fulton Street, Brooklyn, and Anita Lee.
Thank you.
You have 2 minutes to speak. Whomever would like to start, go ahead.
Wonderful. Majority Leader Farias, being a fair, more sustainable food stated to creating a fair, more sustainable food independent restaurants in our sustainable community kitchen. Rethink has delivered over 40 million high-quality meals that celebrate diversity in various cultures. We've also injected over 100 gives us keen insight into community needs, helping us to ensure meals reach families who truly need them most. This year, Rethink is requesting $150,000 from the Speaker's Initiative, Welcome NYC, or Food Pantries Initiative to support and drive our mission forward and provide meals to communities for holiday distributions, special community-based events, or emergencies that arise throughout the year, such as fires, outages, and more, and we hope to count on your support. Our collaboration with partners in government has also offered us opportunities to expand our partnerships with restaurants, a key part of New York City's food infrastructure that we are empowering to drive change by feeding New Yorkers and creating jobs in our community. While restaurants consistently rank among the top industries for creating new jobs, approximately 60% of restaurants fail within their first year, and about 80% close within 5 years. To that end, Rethink is currently exploring a proposal that can mutually support New York State restaurant and agriculture industries, as well as nonprofits, while promoting less food waste and healthier food options. This would be in the form of a food donation tax credit for donated meals to independent nonprofits to then distribute to communities facing food insecurity. We believe there's a real opportunity here to incentivize even more restaurants and small businesses to make a difference by donating their surplus food. We appreciate the Council's attention to creative solutions to support our city's food infrastructure. Thank you so much for your partnership in working with New Yorkers.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Ray Gomes. I'm representing Cultivating Justice, LLC. It's my food equity consultancy. I've also been in food access and food systems work for over 10 years. I was very disheartened to hear some of the ways that MFP and EDC plan on solving some of these problems that have been ongoing in New York City for years. And I just want to read a couple of things. I did some quick and dirty research around, and especially hearing, wanting to support capacity building in emergency food organizations and also centering businesses. So those are the two things I just want to address. So in 2020, Food Bank of New York had $35.4 million in their budget, and in 2022, they had $97.5 million. City Harvest had $209 million in 2020, and then in 2021 had $337 million. And then Campaign Against Hunger in 2020 had $8.5 million in their budget, and in 2022 they had $16.5 million.
18 dead. I don't know how many people are hurt.
I'm not sure what that is. New York Common Pantry in 2019 had $12.6 million in their budget, and in 2021 had $20.3 million. All of this to say that if these organizations wanted to solve food insecurity in New York City, their budgets doubled during COVID, and the problem of food insecurity still exists. The status quo to center businesses and corporate emergency food structures has not worked. It will not work. It will continue to not work. And as long as we keep relying on these approaches, food insecurity, high food costs will persist in the city. And I also just want to distinguish between profit-based institutions and community-centered solutions. Hunts Point is a profit-based center. Their food hub and food system solutions that center community, start with community, and are only interested in supporting community and not increasing their profits. And I implore you all to please look at these alternative food systems as a way of solving these entrenchment issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Anita Lee. This is my first time testifying for City Council, so excuse anything I don't do right. I applaud MOFD's and this council's effort in creating a more resilient food infrastructure system, one point I would like to make is to ensure to create a framework so that these hubs, like Hunts Point, are accessible to a diverse set of food distributors and producers as reflective of the demographics and needs of the New York City. From my understanding, anyone can pay a daily rate to enter Hunts Point, but in order to rent space in the Hunts Point hub, you need to be approved by the existing members and pay duties to be a member. Members being anyone, even companies as large as Costco. And like apartment co-ops, becoming a member is very political and complicated since votes are involved, which may discourage diversity. In this vein, building a new public produce hub at Hunts Point using city funds while keeping the rental entry system the same feels like concentrating opportunities to just a select few, which limits the opportunities for other competitors. Concentrating power to a few players does not reduce food prices, it does the opposite. Second point, has there been any movement to develop the Brooklyn terminal as a food hub as well? Third point, regarding city-owned grocery markets, Essex Markets in Lower Manhattan is owned by New York City and leases its space to various accessible purveyors, meat, fish, fruits, and vegetables, and finished foods for a diverse set of consumers. So the idea of a city-owned grocery market in the model of a publicly traded grocery market chain should be expanded to city-owned public markets that lease spaces to various independent family-run businesses, which might avoid the overcomplication of a city-owned supermarket. If you want to consider successful city-owned public markets, food markets, I feel Essex Market in Lower Manhattan might be one to look at for learning lessons. In conclusion, please consider creating a set of rules to ensure that this taxpayer-funded Hunts Point project maintains easy access to a diverse set of small, medium food distributors and producers so that we don't fund a project just for big players who already have a seat at the table and increase their power to set prices. Perhaps we should consider something similar to how a certain percentage of affordable housing is set aside and new housing develops in exchange for city financial support, but for Hunts Point and its food distributors, produce, tenants. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify when I say against New York City running, but I love Essex Street. That's different. That's the underline is owned by the city, but the markets are individually, privately owned, and it's fabulous. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you all very, very much. Yeah. Okay, we have two people online. Karen Karp first, and then Rachel Lyons. Karen Karp.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, there you are. Karen,
yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, Gail. Hi, everybody. How are you? I just need to pull up my testimony, which I'm afraid is very long.
2 minutes.
So I'm going to try to, actually, I'm sorry, you just caught me a little bit by surprise at this moment. I was just about to sign off. Could I defer to Rachel, and could you come back to me? Would that be okay?
Sure, yeah.
Thanks.
Rachel Lyons.
All right, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We love you. Go ahead. We love your union.
Hey, everybody. Hi there. My name is Rachel Lyons. I'm the Legislative Director for the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union. We represent 1.2 million members in North America and 65,000 members here in the state of New York. And we work across all kinds of food retail, from retail to meat packing, food processing, grocery, as well as in healthcare and cannabis. And thank you so much for the opportunity to join the conversation today. Thank you, Chair Brewer and Chair Fayez. The conversation about a successful food system and what it takes to make it successful is fundamentally important to our members. And we are here to say that every part of this should include provisions that support good jobs in New York City for the nearly 1,000 grocery stores, including food safety, and that should include food safety and delivery in your recommendations. The resilience of New York City's food system is intimately connected to the success of the food workers. And worker-friendly food policies ensure revenue for the city, customers for city businesses, groceries for low-income workers, and their shelves are stocked. We administer SNAP. And we really want everything to support all these economic development policies to include labor standards that support food workers. So for example, in the FRESH program that we've been talking about today, we want to ensure that stores, that in the application process, stores operating with a collective bargaining agreement are part of the application process, as well as taking into account proximity to another union brick and mortar store. We know that we were talking about the good job that it's done, including creating new grocery stores, but some of those pop up right next to
Your time has expired. Thank you.
union grocery store that's been providing good jobs for the workers and members of that neighborhood. And then a quick switch to another topic. Let's talk a little bit about delivery and food safety. The pandemic accelerated consumer habits of ordering food for homes and has done so faster than anybody could have predicted. But there's a lack of food safety protections that apply to the delivery of groceries from store to consumer. We have safety provisions out at meat processing plants. We already have city provisions for in-store, but that crucial moment from store to consumer is without a ton of protections. We want to ensure that food originating from grocery stores is safely delivered to the front doors of consumers everywhere, and ensure that whatever we do require is the burden and the funding comes from the employer to provide food safety training and proper equipment to the drivers who deliver from store to home.
Right. Rachel, can you summarize up? Can you sum up?
Yep. In conclusion, UFCW members urge this committee and the council to incorporate strong labor standards in these food policies, as well as fair wages and good food protections. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. And now we're going back to Karen Karp.
Thanks, everybody. And actually, I'm very glad that I'm going. I'm very glad that I'm going after Rachel today, because my testimony actually supports one of her major points. I have really two major points to make. One is I wanted to bring up a specific element about food affordability and about the role of city food infrastructure to maintain food affordability. One of the reasons that food has become so expensive, both for consumers, but if we talk about buyers that buy in a commercial environment, is because the food system has become so concentrated over the last 50 years. And now most buyers, specifically who are serving city agencies and other corporations and restaurants, hotels, et cetera, are unfortunately too frequently bypassing public infrastructure like the Hunts Point Market, because they are part of a vertically integrated supply chain where companies are contracting with farmers for direct shipment to their warehouses, which too frequently do not exist in New York City or even in the New York City metropolitan area, but in New Jersey, Connecticut, et cetera. And then those same companies are creating contracts with buyers, including institutional buyers, including institutional food buyers in New York City and elsewhere, with fixed prices. And so there is very little room, there is no room actually for negotiation of those prices, because the food system is concentrated and vertically integrated end to end. The function of the Hunts Point produce market in particular is keeps an open environment of competition available for food buyers. And there's hundreds of buyers there every day. There's dozens of vendors there every day selling food and competing against each other for that food, keeping competition alive.
Your time has expired. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
If you want to sum up, go ahead. If you want to sum up. You got cut off. Go ahead.
Yeah. My second point, echoing Rachel's, which is the summary, is that the food system needs more highly educated, highly trained individuals, which will create good food jobs, which will alleviate, at least for the 9% of people that work in food in New York City, to have better incomes, which will improve affordability for them. So in summary, I am fully in support of the renovation of the Hunts Point produce market with programmatic elements built in for education, training, innovation, incubation, energy resilience, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, we have to do it again now. Christopher Leon Jones and Sharon Brown, and we're here to talk about the food infrastructure.
Ready? Yeah. Hello, chairs, Farias and Chair Brewer. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. I am speaking on opposition to all gross New York City owned food stores, and I'm gonna explain why. Because that concept is nothing but a communist, Soviet, Leninist, Marxist idea that was set up by the New York City DSA and Zohran Madani, who will not be mayor of New York City. Let's make that clear. We all know that Andrew Cuomo will be mayor of New York City. Let's make that clear. I'm calling on the next mayor of New York City, Andrew Cuomo, to reject all. Wait, you took a picture with Cuomo. You took a picture with Cuomo.
The government proceeding. You have to stay on topic.
I'm staying on topic. I'm staying on topic. He's part of
staying on topic. You have to stay on topic.
He's a politician, right?
Food quality.
No,
there's a difference between electoral politics and government functionality. This is a government hearing where we're solely talking about the Economic Development Corporation Oversight and Investigation
that's what I'm gonna bring up.
Focused on food infrastructure and quality of food in New York City. So if you would like to make a comment on topic, you are allowed your time.
I am. You took a picture with him, so let's make that. You took a picture. All right, let's go. Let's go for it. You took a picture with him, so let's keep that real. You took a picture with Andrew Cuomo. All right. So, but like I said, this is a bad idea for the city of New York. I'm calling our next mayor to reject the proposal. This is nothing but benefit to DSA. These corrupt unions like Unite Here 100, DC 37, 32 BJ. This benefits all the corrupt unions. And let's keep this real. They're not gonna hire people, regular people. They're gonna hire their own people, the DSA and members, those little corrupt members of DC 37 within the major unions to work those type of jobs. This is not going to benefit nobody at all within these city-owned food stores. Botcher, I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know if that donut that he ate from the string has gone to his head, but this is not going to work. City-owned food stores is nonsense. I call on the city to completely reject this notion. And
thank you.
Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sharon Brown. Before I get started, remember the hostages, release the hostages, let Yahweh's people go, to defend Israel. Also, some of our hostages were starved because it's a food theme. Just remember our hostages. We have 59. Okay, homeless to homes and home gardens. We need to get people into homes, and then when we get people into homes, directly into homes without red tape, we can also start helping them make gardens so that they can sustain living in a home of their own, even plants and things in their house, and they can learn how to grow food, and it will be sustainable for them, not only to go places and get food, but also to grow fruits, vegetables, and whatever kinds of foods they can grow in their home and also in their backyard, front yard, or something like that. So if we can try to get people into homes, veterans, military, homeless, we would be able to help them with food. I want, as I said before, I want to make not-for-profit restaurants and grocery stores, clothing stores, different kinds of chain stores, and people can go there for free. Of course, there are going to be regular stores where people purchase things, but we can have not-for-profit stores where people go to if they have some kind of need over time that is consistent regularly. If something arises, some kind of emergency, they can go to these kind of stores and shop. They don't have to use money. They can come in and shop. We can find out what they need, and I don't know that everybody needs a referral because we can't have red tape. So I would like a store where people feel free to shop.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've now heard from everyone who has signed up to testify. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify in person, please visit the sergeant's table and complete a witness slip. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify virtually, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and a member of our staff will call on you in the order of hands raised. Okay, no one is coming forth, so I'd like to note again that written testimony, which will be reviewed in full by committee staff, may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. And I would like to thank our wonderful co-chair, Council Member Amanda Farias, and all staff. Thanks, Gail.